Jurassic Era is probably the most famous era of dinosaurs among people, and this is because of the Jurassic Park movie series, which in fact people loved a lot about dinosaurs, especially the hero of all the parts, the T. In fact, we will talk about the planet's ecosystem and learn about the life of different creatures, from dinosaurs and marine reptiles to the first mammals. We will delve into the tropical forests that adorn the Earth and see what the state of the planet was like 200 million years ago. As usual, your favorite drink is necessary for entertainment, and if you like paleontology and extinct creatures, this channel is made available. In the late Triassic period, there was a huge mass extinction that affected the ecosystem greatly, separating it from the Jurassic period. Many marine and land creatures became extinct. This was a sad end to the first era of the dinosaurs and a bad beginning for the era. Jurassic because this is considered one of the 5 most powerful mass extinctions that struck the Earth. Until now, the reasons are unknown, possibly due to gradual climate change, lack of oxygen, or global warming. The reasons varied because this happened after the separation of the continent of Pangaea, and this had many consequences. The topic of the Triassic extinction is long, and I want a video on its own, so let us focus more on the Jurassic period now. The Jurassic period is the second Mesozoic era. The early era began after the end of the Triassic period, 200 million years ago, and ended with the beginning of the Cretaceous period, 145 million years ago. It was an era characterized by a more humid and flat climate than the Triassic period, and colder and hotter than the Cretaceous period. Due to the drift of the continents, mainly in the Triassic period, the continents were united in one continent, which was Pangaea. But in the early Jurassic period, the continents began to separate at a slow rate, so that they were close together, but they were divided into 2 main continents, which were Laurasia in the north, represented by North America, and Arwasia, which means Asia and Europe. Gondwana in the south is represented in South America, Africa, Australia, India, and Antarctica. We also do not understand how the separation of the continents was the reason for climate change, as we said. The Triassic period was distinguished by a dry atmosphere and high temperatures, and this is due to the scarcity of seas in the middle of Pangaea, and also the presence of many desert areas. But with the gradual separation, water began to penetrate between the continents and the inland seas increased, and this raised the humidity of the atmosphere and reduced the temperature slightly compared to the Triassic period. But we cannot ignore that the drift of ticks had other consequences, the most important of which was the revival of dormant volcanoes, which cooled large amounts of carbon dioxide and thus the temperature. It was shaken due to global warming. I feel that you were a little confused, dear viewer. Look, quite simply, at the beginning of the era, the temperature was lower than in the Triassic period, but it was cold compared to the end of the Jurassic period, because with the calm of the volcanoes, the increase in inland seas, and the rise in water levels, the temperature continued to decrease until we reached the afternoon chalk. The great change in climate allowed for continuous heavy rains and gave wide scope for the growth of giant trees and the spread of forests. Many green areas flourished on Earth after the Triassic extinction, which exhausted the planet for years. In the Cretaceous period, we knew why it was called by this name. Scientists discovered many chalk deposits, so they said, we will call it the Cretaceous period. But why did Grassi prove exactly what? In the early 19th century, the French scientist Alexandre Brengy discovered many fossils in the Jura Mountains separating France and Switzerland. These excavations had the same chronology with the second era in Mesozoic life. So he said, okay, we will name this era after the Jura Mountains that we found, in which fossils are called the Grass Era, meaning the Jurassic period. Of course, the most important creatures that lived in this era were the dinosaurs, but they had other creatures present in abundance, the most important of which were crocodiles, giant fish in the seas that ruled the seas, in addition to plants and insects. All of these are types that appeared in the ecosystem, but the creatures that existed on birds and mammals are shy. But as for the gears, they were still suffering from mass extinction, especially since their first appearance was in the middle to late Triassic period, meaning the Triassic extinction era. Thank God they came out of it well, and in the end they became extinct at the end of the Cretaceous period because of the quick. I will give you a short, sad story. Now we will talk about life in the Jurassic period, We will start with plants and insects, then we will focus on life in the seas. In the Triassic period, plants were called plants and branches. This means that there were fossils of plants dating back to the Triassic period, but they were all small plants. On the contrary, in the fossils of plants found in the Jurassic period, there were gymnosperm plants and their seed plants. It is naked, meaning that it does not contain an outer shell. And unlike the angiosperm, it is not a catfish, and this helps it reproduce through wind movements. One of the most important plants of these are the giant conifer trees. The different types of trees throughout the Jurassic era have a delightful and picturesque view. Flowering plants were not as widespread as in the Terwasian era, but forests were present everywhere to the point that it is called the Age of Sequels. These plants resemble the current palm trees and were characterized by a strong woody stem and large, solid leaves, in addition to the height they reached. For 20 meters, you can see, dear viewer, the current Amazon forest that everyone is fascinated by. Oh, the Jurassic forests were the improved version of them. And just as the plants were large and diverse, so were the insects. The insects of the Jurassic period were distinguished by their relatively large size compared to contemporary insects. And this is due to the large increase in the percentage of oxygen in the atmosphere. The percentage of oxygen in the Triassic period was 13%, while in the Jurassic period it reached 26%, meaning double, while the normal rate is supposed to be 21%. This allowed dragonflies to spread widely, decorating the waters and trees with their delicate colored wings. But actually, the insects that amazed me when I searched for them are butterflies. Make it clear, dear viewer, that we have with us a fossil dating back to the Jurassic era that has the exact shape of the current butterfly, and even the size is not very different. Indeed, the creatures that adorn the Jurassic era, and as usual, as there are attractive insects in it, there is something frightening and terrifying. We are talking here about spiders, even though they were not very dominant, but they varied in size. This means that scientists estimated that there were spiders 2 or 2 years long, but in 2 holes they were found. One corner says otherwise, because the lengths of these spiders exceeded 1.5 centimeters. These are the largest fossils of spider species ever found. And note that there are only these 2 holes, but the ones that were found for them come and stay, dear viewers. We go into the forest for a while and go down to the depths of the seas and see how life was working in the Middle Atlantic Ocean. As we said at the beginning of the episode, dear viewer, the Jurassic period got off to a bad start, which is the period of recovery from the Triassic extinction. The idea is that the system most affected by this extinction is the marine organisms, dear viewer. Half of the creatures that lived in the Triassic period disappeared by the Jurassic period, but diversity increased rapidly in some species during the first 4 million years of the beginning of the era. But after about 20 million years, some species of invertebrates that lived in the depths of the Paleozoic eras became extinct. However, in some areas, more than 80% of the conch animals became extinct, in addition to the lack of diversity of creatures in Europe, and the reasons for these large extinctions have differences among the scientists themselves, with people saying that this is due to the lack of oxygen in the water during the early era, and the scientists relied on layers of oil rocks that contain organic materials that contain oxygen bottleneck, and that is why in the middle of the era, the marine creatures completely recovered, and this may be due to the increase in the percentage of oxygen that we explained before. And some scientists are close to saying that these creatures did not become extinct or anything, but we did not find any fossils of them due to the inefficiency of the Jurassic crust in preserving fossils. Other reasons varied, such as the water level in the northern continent decreased, but these were the most important reasons. Despite this, the Jurassic period contained the largest bony fish in the history of the planet, as well as predatory marine reptiles such as the Belius. So let me, dear viewer, take you on a trip to the depths of the ocean in which we learn about the most prominent creatures, some of the most dangerous and powerful creatures that ever lived at this time. The Belizeans are different from the Belizean suret. The Belizean suret were distinguished by a longer and larger skull and a small neck, but they were faster than the Belizean suret, which had a long neck. What made the Belizeans among the most dangerous marine creatures at that time were the strong fins and the jaw full of teeth. Imagine that the jaw contained more than 100 teeth of various sizes. If we focus on the shape of the jaw, we will find that the leading part is prominent and narrow and contains a small gap. These features allow the ball mill to cut meat easily, and the teeth in the middle of the jaw are larger and more solid, and they help in breaking bones. The speed factor and the strength of the jaw give the jaw a great advantage. At that time, even if it was lighter in size, there was a Leo Bourdon whose height was 6 meters. Oh, there was old research that said that his height exceeded 25 meters. But it turned out that this research was wrong, and the Crohn's Sir was the one that exceeded 10 meters, and their great uncle remained the Predator X-Play. Funky Wall, which scientists estimate is 15 meters long, and although we will see marine creatures larger than that, the Bellis rats were the most dangerous. Belizean rats lived from the late Triassic period until the late Taurasian period. They adapted greatly to the changes that occurred on the planet, to the point that they have overcome the strange Triassic extinction. Dear viewer, that the Velociraptor that we talked about is originally from the family of the Velociraptor. Let me explain to you more. This is a group of marine reptiles that are divided into two parts: the Velociraptor, which has a long neck and high body flexibility, and the Velociraptor, which has the largest skull and is characterized by its long neck. By the name of the Velociraptor, because they lived before the Velociraptor, and after that, the second type appeared, and it became clear that it has a great connection with them. And the special thing is that they also live together at the same time. And the greatest example of this is Kronosaur and Alasmasaur. The two lived together in the Cretaceous period, and the Sur at Belize fed mainly on small fish. They used to go near the group of fish and collect their spoils. Their teeth were long and very thin, yes, but they were not solid, except that the jaw was already small. So that is the process of hunting Belize. Sauret differed from their peers, Sauret, but the fact that the sea creature really impressed me was the Leeds fish. This fish lived in the middle of the Grass Age and was distinguished by its giant size. Will you tell me how giant this is? This is due to the fossil of the fish. The idea is that scientists did not find a complete fossil of it. There was a fossil of a giant dale, and the other has bony gills that are 3 times larger than the gills of a stubborn tuna fish. When scientists study these parts of the fossils individually, they find that the size of the fish can reach the size of a blue whale. However, this did not surprise paleontologist Jeff Liston.